Hello, welcome to your first tutorial for SIMPLECAD. What we are going to do over the next 5 minutes or so is introduce you to some basic tools in SIMPLECAD and show you how to go about creating a title block. Now the title block is the border and information that you're going to use as a starting point for every single CAD drawing you do in this unit. So to get started, let's give you a brief introduction and a tour of CAD. You have your main drawing area in the center of your screen. You have some basic drawing and editing tools over on the left-hand side. You have your object snap tools and your command bar down along the bottom. And you have your add objects bar over on the right-hand side. So this is where you will pick the objects that you want to draw on your screen. And we have some basic menus along the top that allows you to edit some various objects. Okay, so let's look at our instructions. The very first thing that we ask you to do is to set up your page. So we are going to choose SIMPLECAD Preferences, and I want you to make sure that the units we're using are centimeters, and I would like you to set your grid size to 0.5 like you see here. And then we can say OK. Now what I'd like you to do is from your main menu, choose Layout, and change view size and background color. When we open that up, we're going to determine how large our actual drawing page is going to be. So I would like you to put in the numbers you see here, view width of 27 units and a view height of 22 units, and you'll recall we just set our units to centimeters. Now I prefer if you choose a white background, so please set that to white and we will say OK. So now our page is almost set up and ready to go. We're going to be asking you to print your drawings when they are finished. So in order for us to set that up, I would like you to go to the File menu and choose Page Setup. I would like you to set your scale to 90%, and I would like you to set your orientation of your page to portrait. Sorry, not portrait, landscape. That's portrait, that is landscape. And we'll say OK. All right, time to do some drawing. So when we want to add objects to our screen, we are going to go to the Add Object menu. And I'm going to scroll down, and the first object I'm going to choose is a rectangle. So I choose the rectangle, I come back over onto my screen. Now it says down on our command line, input first corner point. So what I'm going to do now is use my keyboard to type in the XY coordinates of my first point. So I'm going to type in 1, 1, and hit enter. So you'll notice that that has created the start of a rectangle on my screen. This bottom left corner is locked into position at 1, 1. And now I want to do the opposite corner, and I'm going to type in the coordinates 26, 21. And there I have a 25 by 20 rectangle that's nicely centered inside my page. So that is step number 1, learning how to use the rectangle tool and your Cartesian coordinate system. The second tool we're going to learn how to use is called the Fillet tool. So the Fillet tool will allow you to round the corners of a square object. So when I choose the Fillet tool, I'm going to then look down to my command line at the bottom, and I'm going to see options that are now available for me. And it says here I can choose the options of radius or trim. So I would like to choose the radius option, so I'm going to hit R, enter, and now I'm going to enter a number that's going to indicate how large of a radius I'm going to use to round my circle. And that may be a little bit confusing to you now, but I'm going to show you how to do it and it will make sense once we see. So I'm going to enter a radius of 0.4. So I type in 0.4 and hit enter. And I'm going to come back now and select my Fillet tool and click on the top line and then the right hand side line. And you'll see what it does is it rounds the corner up here as if there's a circle sitting right there that has a radius of 0.4 centimeters. So I'm going to continue with that same process 3 more times and put a radius in all 3 of my corners. So I choose Fillet. Notice my radius is already set at 0.4 because I just did that. I don't need to do it again. So I can simply click, click, and there's my radius corner. Fillet, click, click, and one more time. There we go. So I've now rounded off my corners nicely. The next thing I'd like to do is introduce another tool to you, and that tool is called the Offset tool. And what it will do is duplicate a shape that you already have, but it will offset it through a distance that you decide. And you can make it a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. So what I'm going to do to run that tool is make sure I take my selection arrow. I'm going to click on an object. I'm going to select Offset. And I'm going to type in an offset distance again of, let's try 0.4. And I'm going to hit Enter. So now what I can do is bring my mouse near the object I've already selected, and you can see I can either make my duplicate or offset shape a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. And in this case, I'm going to make it go to the outside. So I'm going to continue this process fairly quickly with all of my other pieces. And reproducing them all to the outside, as you see. So that takes care of my 4 lines. Now, because I did a fillet on my corner, the computer sees these as separate pieces. So I'm going to have to offset them the exact same way. And you'll see that it's going to reproduce a nice duplicate of my original shape, just a little bit larger. So there's some good practice for using your offset tool. There we go, very good. Now I've got my double border with a nice filleted corner. The next thing I want to do is draw a box in this bottom corner to allow me to put some information in there. So I'm going to use my grid. So I'm going to turn on my Snap to Grid feature, and that shows me the grid that I already had set up. And remember, we set our grid distance at 0.5 centimeters. So that means every 2 of these dots or boxes is going to be equal to 1 centimeter. So here what I'm going to do is have you draw another rectangle. And I'm going to have you draw that rectangle at right here. So I'm going to go up to a point on my screen that is 18 over, I'm going to type this in actually just like we did before, 18 comma 5 as my coordinate. Enter, and there you'll see my anchored spot. And I'm going to do that all the way over to 26 comma 1. And there we go. So that now gives me an area to put in information. So I'm going to clean that up a little bit by taking my line tool, and now that my Snap to Grid is still turned on, I can just use click and use my mouse to draw the lines rather than using coordinates. So in this case, it's a little bit easier and a little bit quicker. There we go. So I now have 4 slots to add some information. What I would like to do next with that is, I guess I'm going to trim away the extra spot. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and there's a trick to using zoom. You can either zoom right here, which forces you then to use your scroll bars to get back to where you want, or you can hold down the Apple plus and Apple minus buttons. That will zoom you in and zoom you out. So after I've zoomed in so I can see this corner quite clearly, I'm going to turn my Snap to Grid off, and I'm going to take my Trim tool, which allows you to cut or trim a line at any point on which you click, and it will trim that line all the way until it bumps into another line. So again, choose Trim, simply hit Enter, and then you take your cursor and you click on the line that you want to disappear, and I have to zoom in a little bit more because that wasn't the part that I want to disappear. I'll zoom in, and I'll trim again, I'll hit Enter, and I want to click on this part right here. And you'll see it gets rid of that line going all the way until it bumps into there, and I'll now get rid of that piece. So I now have a nice, neat, rounded corner, just the way I want. So my title block is almost done. The last thing I need to do is add some text information to tell me what my drawing is all about. So in order to do that, I'm going to add an object. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to take my text button, and I'm going to add a text box right there. And in that text box, I'm going to type the title of my drawing. So this drawing is called my title block. So I'm just going to type in title block. I can choose the color and font if I want right here, but I'm going to leave it the way it is. And I'm going to add another object. So a second text object, and this one's going to be my name. I'm going to add a third one. And this one is going to be the date. Now I'm going to type in date, but I want you to actually type in the date of your drawing. And the last one is going to be a position for a scale statement. Now this is a title block, so it's going to be quite generic. We're not putting a specific scale on this drawing, and we won't actually be putting scales on most of our drawings. So unless I tell you to put in a different scale statement, I would like you to put in a very generic 1:1, which stands for 1 unit in the real world is equal to 1 unit on my drawing, but we're not really defining what those units are. So scale 1:1 will work fine for me right now. So there is my finished title block. You've learned how to draw rectangles, you've learned how to do a fillet, you've learned how to do an offset, you've learned how to turn your grid on and off, and we've also learned how to trim lines that we don't necessarily want. So what I'd like you to do right now is simply save your drawing to your desktop. So I'll choose Save As. I will call it my title block, and I will save that to my desktop. There we go. Good job. So you're going to move on now and continue to do orthographic drawings within your title block. So I expect you to open up this title block again. Before you start doing your orthographic drawing, you can simply File, Save As. I'm going to call this Ortho1, and I'll save it to my desktop. And then I will continue to do my orthographic drawing right there.
Mrs. Dobas, call the office. Mrs. Dobas, call the office, please.
Are you kidding me?